Welcome back to Old School Eats. I am Derek Old School Fournier, and today we're making one of my favorite things, and it's a side. And I'm not a huge side guy. I'm a proteins guy. I like making the meats, and I let Elena deal with the sides. But when you do barbecue, you kind of have to learn to make a couple of sides, and that's why my baked beans are really more like a chili. I call them carnivore beans, and that's what's up next. Through the magic of time lapse, now we have everything prepared. We're trying to go for a sort of mise en place approach. I will be honest, I am lazy as hell. So these are my onions, and I use this cool choppy thing. I'm not trying to impress anyone with my knife skills because, to be honest, they're just not that damn good. But we got our 2 yellow onions chopped up here. We got our 3 pounds of bacon, and the recipe really only calls for 2, but I just don't think you can have too much bacon in it. We got our roughly 3 pounds of 80/20 beef. We got some garlic. My man Malcolm did a great job of chopping up for me. I drained as much of the juice as I could squeeze out of these beans. I've got my sauce, and really the sauce is going to be follow your heart, and then my seasoning. The process is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to use a cast iron skillet. I'm going to do the bacon first, get it nice and crispy, pull it out, stack it, drain it. But I'm going to preserve a lot of that bacon grease. Now, I started doing something years ago when I was making this that now other people do, and so I feel like I'm not crazy anymore. I sop up some of the bacon grease with a big clump of paper towels and throw them away to get some of the bacon grease out of there. Because trying to scoop it out with a spoon or trying to lift that big ass cast iron thing is a pain. So I'm going to preserve a fair amount because then I'm going to saute the onions. Once the onions get to be around translucent, I'm going to throw the garlic in there, hit it with a little bit of the seasoning. Then my chuck goes in. My chuck cooks with the onions and the seasoning. And I start to squish that aside as the fat comes off of it, season the beef so that it tastes good. And once you know that it tastes good, we can start to combine these things. We then combine the beans, the bacon, and the beef onion mixture and fold them together because you don't want to mash these beans up with a little bit of the sauce to give yourself a barbecue back end. That is then going to be done. All you have to do after that is bake it in the oven when you're ready to do it, and we'll cover that later in the recipe. As you can see, the onions getting nice and translucent, cooking in this bacon fat. Got all the fond off the bottom. I guess it's still considered fond from the bacon. I'm going to season them a little bit here. I'm using my favorite, as you know, Cosmo Cube, Hot Berry Bird. Just a little seasoning down in here now. I'll season heavier when we get into the ground beef portion. I'm going to go ahead and put my garlic in here now. Get that getting fragrant. This slurry that I'm creating, I'm going to cook down because it's in this bacon fat. I don't run the risk, I don't believe anyway, I haven't experienced it anyway, of getting the garlic to burn. That's always the risk when you put your garlic in. This is actually all suspended in a bit of bacon grease. And yeah, that may sound gross, but it is also delicious. So I'm going to cook this down a little bit more. And then we'll be putting that ground chuck in. And because we're doing a full batch, there's going to be a lot of fat that runs off there. So we're going to have to handle that in this smaller cast iron. I would normally do this in 2 batches, but I was not smart enough to do that this time. So we'll see how it works out. As you can see, the onions have taken on a nice darker color with the seasoning as well as cooking a little bit more. Obviously, you have no ability to smell this, but it smells fantastic. The garlic's opened up. Now we're going to add the ground chuck to the party. Break these up one at a time. Like I mentioned, it's 80/20, so this is going to become a pretty fat hot tub. So once we get this thing going, get some of that rendering down, I'm going to incorporate it all with the onions because that will allow the beef fat to take the center stage. So incorporating this all together, when we get the meat down onto the hot surface and start to cook. cooked, obviously. So I guess some people do eat raw beef, ground beef. But if it doesn't taste right here, it's not going to taste right in the beans because you're getting a lot of the flavor for these beans from this mixture. Because we drained off all of the stock sauce from the bushes. Not to offend the Bush Empire, but I prefer this. So we'll let this go for a while. And we'll drain off some fat. So at this point, I've drained off a pretty good portion of the beef fat. Applied a healthy but to taste amount of hot dirty bird. You can see the color difference. And now I'm going to use whatever magical device this thing is to scoop this into the pan. Once you scoop it in the pan, I'll apply the barbecue sauce and give it a fold. Then we will cover it with heavy duty aluminum foil to rest. And tomorrow we will bake it for an hour and a half at 350. 1 hour uncovered, half an hour, or 1 hour covered, and the last half hour uncovered. Then we're done. All right, we're all incorporated. Like I said, you want to fold this as not to mash the beans. Then you want to let it settle. I'm going to let it sit here for a little while. Then I'll wrap it up in the heavy-duty aluminum foil, store it in the refrigerator. And as I mentioned before, it's an hour and a half at 350. First hour covered, then take the covering off. Last 30 minutes uncovered. It'll brown up the top. And I think it's going to be the best beans you've ever had, but it's definitely not a standard pit bean.